See, this is what I'm totally telling you guys. Please bear with me. This is going to be great. We got this. Okay. So these are some of the Future Spaces events, webinars that I got lined up for you. Next week will be Ann Millen, who is actually the director of story at Meow Wolf. So very, very exciting. Marco Brambilla, which is a little bit of a crossover between Art World and Future Spaces, will be joining me on September 14th. Crazy great lineup. Very, very excited. There's actually even some more beyond this. Just booked Team Lab. Some really exciting stuff. I'm really eager to have these conversations. And then also, if there's folks that you want me to talk to, email me at josh@bluecadet, Future Spaces, or Our World, and I will certainly try to make it happen. Also, I'm starting to do some in-person events. So I don't even have the date for this one on there, but this is September 27th at the Neue Haus Venice house in LA. So if you happen to live in Los Angeles, just follow me on LinkedIn and I will, or any of the Future Spaces channels, and I will announce this shortly. But this is actually a panel with Joel Free from LACMA and Sarah Connolly Odenkirk, who's an attorney that focuses on NFTs and AI. And we're going to be talking to some of the interesting things happening in this weird NFT winter. So it should be very interesting, provocative, and in person. And then also I will be in New York next week, where Marco Brambilla and my partner Neo Thompson will be presenting at Photo Fairs next Saturday. We have a booth at Photo Fairs, which is a new fair kind of for Armory Week. But check it out. I'll be kind of kicking around New York. If you're there, want to say hello, just reach out. It'll be fun. Get to look at a lot of fun art. And today we are here to listen to and talk with Ryan Howard, who's the technical project manager at Google. So Ryan and I have had many conversations about experience design, about the practice of experience design. He's operated at all levels and across a lot of different kind of organizations, from agencies to vendor side, in the technology, in the client work, and now he's at Google working on the enterprise. Really, really interesting thinker in the space. And I think it's also just a really interesting idea of, how do you scale experience across a organization as small and bespoke as Google. So Ryan will be getting into all of that. Afterwards, we will be basically getting questions from you all, from myself. We'll have a conversation. I would also say, please introduce yourself in the chat. Say hello. And if you have any questions, put it in the QA and I will put your questions ahead of my own. So with that, I will hand it off to Ryan. All right, Ryan, you ready?
Oh, now I'm ready.
You're ready. Okay. All right, cool. Take it away.
All right. Pull up. It'll probably surprise no one that I'm not an expert at Zoom. Takes me a second. All right. Everyone hear me and see the amazing black slides with white text?
Right. Yes.
Looks good. Right. All right. So I have this fantastic, very catchy name, but don't read too deeply into it. I'm going to try to cover a lot of things here, two major things. And I want to start by kind of like triggering everyone on this call and go, hey, what is the ROI on experiences? And how do we make that better? And I know over the last couple of years, as I've had a lot of conversations with people around the industry, this becomes one of those things where people are either like just like want to walk away because it's such a frustrating, like we can't put this into financial terms kind of thing, although we have to put it in financial terms, or like it's just a hard story to tell. The problem is especially inside of big companies, and when you're doing this kind of client side, you have to face a lot of skeptical executives. That might be a CFO. It might just be some sort of influential stakeholder that could be kind of ambivalent or hostile towards the idea of experience design or any kind of like really design-led activity. Engineering is kind of the word of the day. I think we went through a phase where human-centered design and things like that were really like on the cover of every magazine, but now it's back to data, and engineering kind of conversation. So it's hard sometimes to make progress here. So I want to talk a bit about how we do that. Um, so a little bit of like why I'm talking about this is that I am at Google. We're a very sort of data-centric organization in theory. And I lead this portfolio of event technology solutions. It's really a pretty broad set of solutions. Now, I work across the PAs, which is our word for BUs. Um, so PA is product area, but that means like I work across with the real estate teams, engineering on our side, event operations teams. Some of those are internal, some of those are vendors. So it's a pretty big mix, and we're really supporting a very wide range of things that are very customer facing, external facing, very high value, high stakes kinds of events, and things that are purely internal that are, still cost money, but don't necessarily have direct revenue impact. And that range creates a lot of challenges in trying to talk about what's important, why we make investments, how we measure those things. I'm also a co-lead of the Experience Institute, which is a sort of internal, external thought leadership forum that my colleague Megan Henschel started, that we've been working with a lot of different vendors, manufacturers, other client side users across the events industry to think about what the future of events is. It's this opportunity for us to be very experimental, very future facing without being tied into particular projects. And so a lot of the work here I'm going to talk about started there and has moved into our more kind of day-to-day jobs. So it's great because Megan and I are also great partners. Besides the Experience Institute, we're really very direct partners within our day jobs and how we kind of look at this horizontally across the entire org. So all this kind of feeds together and gets us from very kind of blue sky, explore the future into like, what can we go like action now? What's tactical? What's strategic? And how can we have impact? One other thing I kind of want to cover, two other things I want to point out. One is I'm not representing all of Google. Many of you will probably have interacted with other people at Google that I'll barely know or maybe not know at all. It's a very big org, and there are pockets of this around. Our area is focused on probably the broadest and the highest volume. We deal with thousands of events and or potentially tens of thousands of events and many, many spaces that we own and operate within the world I work in. But there are also the marquee events and things like that, and they kind of are their own self-contained worlds. So this is not holistic, but this is really thinking about the scaled, value-focused, efficient and effective kind of space. And then I'm going to talk about events and experiences interchangeably. So I generically try to talk about experiences as much as possible. My day-to-day focus is really on event experiences that also bleeds over into activations. There's a parallel portfolio to mine that is very focused on EBCs and activations and things like that. So a lot of this, like all of this applies holistically. We really think of this as sort of a full spectrum where events are part of that experiential mix, but there could be more individual experiences, activations, kiosks, those kinds of things. So moving on. One of the reasons this has been a challenge, as I said before, is there's a lot of people that are involved in these things. And in the end, there are two major axioms, I guess, that have become apparent to me, or at least feel like something to build from. The first is experiential value looks different to everyone. And that is true on any given single project. It's especially true when you look across major programs. And it's true when you look at it, at an organizational or sort of a corporate level. There are a lot of people at a lot of different levels. They have different sort of stakes in the game. And so that experiential value looks tremendously different. It might be brand building, sales pipeline, culture, recruitment. Those are all things that I think are quite familiar to people in the design industry. But as you get inside and you start to look at broader applications of a lot of these design methods and patterns, I think productivity is something that actually we can help drive. Risk management is actually a big way that we frame things. Something I learned working in the financial industry, risk management is really a strong rationale for doing a lot of this stuff because you create incentivized pathways for people to do things in a safe, compliant way versus leaving them on their own where they're going to potentially choose, shortcuts to get everybody in trouble. So the value of this looks different to everyone. it's easy to come back to finances because everyone sort of understands dollars, and it's always easy to say we saved 10%, but save 10% at the cost of what is a great question. So to that point, I think the second axiom is that the experiential value story becomes more complicated with distance from revenue. So it's really clear if you are designing themed entertainment, a roller coaster, you sell tickets. Hey, that's monetizable. Money is why it's there. Revenue is why it's there, and it's pretty easy to orient people around those North Stars. But as you step away from that and you get into something like leadership planning summits or conferences, how do you what's the value of that? You're further from revenue. Clearly, there's value, and being further from revenue doesn't diminish the value, but the value might be expressed in a different way and realized in a different way. So money is always a part of it. There's always a cost, but the return on that investment is different. And the nature of the investment also is more complicated than just the spend. So this is, really the dead center problem for my colleagues and I as we work across this ecosystem. And we don't really deliver these experiences. We don't design and deliver activations every day. We work with agencies who do that. We don't design and deliver and produce the events every day. We have vendors, we have agencies, we have clients, internal clients who do that. We actually deliver an ecosystem and nurture that ecosystem that allows others to do it. So it's like we're delivering a giant business platform that everybody else utilizes. That ecosystem is pretty complicated. It definitely looks a lot like the Rube Goldberg contraption on the screen some days, and we're constantly trying to put more order and structure to it. And effectively, lots of things go in, but money is one of the big ones that matters, especially within a corporate environment. But what comes out are this wide range of experiences. And what you see here is just a shot from the 3-day conference we ran called XI Days earlier this year that was really about that whole future of events. We brought a lot of people into Google. It was more than 50% external participants, and we had a lot of great conversations, including things about neurodiversity and scalable solutions to these problems that I'm going to touch on. Let's see. I think just to kind of give you an idea of some of the things we're talking about that are not revenue, but that are business purposes that we are serving is town halls are a really big one. Leadership summits are a big one. Topical summits about specific things, like it might be AI research. It's obviously a big area for Google right now. Training, team building, internal comms uses, demos of products. These are all really common event purposes, and there's really no reason why they have to be treated though as pure commodity. Like they should be excellent experiences for people. Events are a huge lever on creating corporate culture, on creating any kind of culture, and getting people to drive innovation and to drive conversation. So we need to maintain as high of an experience value as we can, but at the same time, the sheer volume of this means we have to do it as cost effectively and as efficiently and as resiliently as we can, and do this day in, day out. So there are many challenges of scale here that we're trying to approach. Data obviously is a big part of this, and I have I think maybe a different sort of relationship with data than most people do right now, or I think of it differently. I think there is a little bit of a cult of data in the world at the moment, and I see people with "I love data" T-shirts on. I think if you look at it and if you think not data for a second, you just think about people. There's a lot of people in the world. We all depend on a lot of people in the world. Most of them are strangers. Some of them we meet, some of them we don't meet. They might be farmers, doctors, road maintenance workers, Amazon delivery drivers, all those kinds of things. But in the end, we need our friends and our colleagues for us to live our best life. Data is a lot like that from my point of view. Data is an apathetic stranger. It's necessary. It fills a need, but we're strangers to each other. So data, raw data, it's a stranger to me. I'm a stranger to it. What really matters to me are insights. Insights are when we have data and it's well contextualized. It tells me something that's actionable. What can I do? How can I have an impact? What can I, change? I think insights are really the most important thing to get to with data. So I want to focus on that. And I think insights let us tell each other stories. They let us make a case for one decision or another, just like friends help make cases for this life decision or that life decision. But insights can do that for us with data. And that's really what we're trying to do with this idea called ExPo. ExPo is basically a framework that we've been developing for organizing and relating insights around experiences. The premise here is that ExPo is outlining this experiential ecosystem of services, touch points, and tools that enable experiential strategies and tactics to create particular business, communal, and personal outcomes. So that's a lot, and I'll unpack that a little bit more in just a second. But the idea here is that Rube Goldberg of an ecosystem that we're constantly trying to put more structure and organization to. It's super broad, it's super deep, it's complex, and its scale and complexity reflects the scale and complexity of our business. And any business is going to be different, but they have their own nature of complexity and scale. We all have these same challenges. They might look slightly different, but in the end, sort of the fundamental challenges are there in terms of complexity and scale. There's a lot of things we can measure, but does that measurement really tell us what we need to know? Do we really have access to it? Can we aggregate it? Can we relate to it? Josh and I were just having a conversation before this about how hard, it might seem like a great idea to measure super tactical things like dwell time and interaction times around an activation. But in the end, what does that really give us? Is it something that we can turn into the ability to continue to fund and power that activation over many years, or is it just useless information? It could be either, and it's hard to know, and it's hard to know what what each stakeholder needs. It's even harder to keep track of that when you have this huge multiplicity of stakeholders. So we've started developing this idea called ExPo, which is shorthand for experiences, performance, and outcomes. So it's just three major pillars that we bucket things into, objectives and KPIs into. So I'm going to kind of build this from the top down. So experiences, they map and evaluate those experiential strategies and tactics, and that's a range, that's a spectrum. So I'm going to get to that in the next slide. Performance maps that big ecosystem, and that ecosystem are services, touch points, and tools. Another way of thinking about that is people, teams, right? Spaces or physical activations, touch points, some moment where you stand as an audience, but there's stuff around you, it's that environment. And then the tools you use to deliver these things, whether it's to fabricate and deliver and install, or whether it's to operate it every day or manage it every day, or just to organize event management is a big challenge. So all these tools, all of this stuff is the ecosystem. The outcomes are the part that I think often get missed. And frankly, this is where the biggest challenge in the corporate world has been, I think. We have not been able to very clearly and articulately say what our business objectives are, what our communal objectives are, personal objectives are, and to differentiate those and talk about how we measure them and what they mean. So this is a way of bucketing those three things. The next piece of this is to recognize that whole idea of different stakeholders have different needs, different versions of what value means or what's important to them. And so this is mapped across 4 levels. Starting at the bottom is the most tactical, what I call tasks or tactics. And by the way, some of this language also conveniently maps to just critical user journey theory and things like that are within the design world. So there's an attempt here to even bridge language between technology, real estate, experience design, and other pieces. There's a mix of language here that's intentional, and a lot of it's trying to bridge those different specialty languages and not try to unify languages. I think that's probably a hopeless endeavor. But level 1 is really very, very tactical. It's all the specific moments. You could go as far into the weeds as you want to. Level 2 starts to summarize that into something that maybe the average person could understand. So this is what I call goals or heuristics. I'll talk a little bit about how we're applying this in a couple of slides, but this is something like, I'm going to have a town hall. I'm going to build an interactive kiosk. Like, that's something that captures a whole lot of really tactical aspects, but it's something that kind of is shorthand for the outcome that generally people can understand what we're trying to get to. Level 3 is strategic. This is something you look at where you start to look now more at a longer term life cycle that's yearly, year over year, multi-year kind of strategies and performance. Whereas below that, we're really looking on an activation life cycle or an event life cycle basis. Although that, that can mix as well. And then by the time we get to level 4, executive, that's thinking about this. The lens here is like, could be an industry level perspective if you're a trade organization, it could be corporate. It's certainly like the CFO level or the COO level, somebody who's really worried about why are we even making an investment in this particular area anyway? Could we not spend our money better on more conference rooms, for example? So this is trying to start to look at how we can take those 3 pillars and then divide them by those four levels. Now, I didn't want to go super deep into this. I just want to kind of sketch this out. But the idea here is within each one of those intersections or cells, what we're doing is putting in objectives within there and a KPI that lets us measure that objective. Now, many things that are objectives are hard to measure as we get into the experiential world. And the beauty of this idea is that it lets us take things between these 3 pillars or going up and down in those layers and takes things that are measurable, very measurable, especially in that level 1 area, and aggregate those up and start to tell a more impactful story. So it might just be about like AV system performance. That's very measurable at task 1 or at level 1. But by the time you get to level 3, it can be inferred, it can be aggregated up, and you can report out trend lines, which becomes a lot more meaningful to an executive versus trying to get into something like pixel count or like you could even get to like mean time between failure, right? Like that's a much more strategic look. But it's something that an average executive that's not a specialist in SME or not a specialist in experience design might be able to understand. So the same thing as we get to outcomes, those are often very hard to measure. And ultimately what we're trying to get to is that upper right quadrant or that cell of like executive level outcomes, which might be employee retention, it might be build culture, all of those things. Those are very hard to measure. But if we built this mapping of things, then we can start to have like cause and effect. We can say, hey, we have strong correlation that says if we keep doing this, we start to see these changes. So over time, this becomes a model that lets us start to build a lot more confidence in the details that we measure. And in the end, we're able to pull out on sort of a stakeholder basis this like very well articulated stories that are meaningful to that audience. So we delivered a certain kind of experience using certain kinds of capabilities to meet whatever objectives. This could take many different forms. It doesn't have to be like fake poetry like it looks like on this slide, but I think the goal here is that we have this framework, we continuously are looking back at it, and we're able to start to articulate the right story at the right time to the right audience. Now, that's one aspect of it, is just telling stories. And this is kind of where we started was, hey, we just need to describe what the value of these experiences are to executives. And that work started within the XI program. And we started developing this. As I said, Megan, myself, other people in our other colleagues within Google, we were working on that, but at the same time, we had much more like, hard business deliverables we had to work on. And we found ourselves applying this right away. And there are a couple of different ways that I want to talk about. So the first is we have been aggregating all of those many experiences with that wide range into a catalog. So it's kind of a service catalog, it's kind of a solution catalog. It combines a number of different things. But ultimately, that framework, that ExPo framework that has those different levels lets us take this catalog, put that information in, and we're starting to identify what are the business objectives we're trying to achieve with a particular kind of event. What are the activities or the tactics that support that outcome? And then how can we measure the performance of the ecosystem to assure that we're doing both of those things? So it becomes a way of starting to like very programmatically, systemically organize this and create that relationship. So as I said, the level 2 in ExPo was that heuristic piece. Well, this is what that maps to. So the idea here of an assembly, which is sort of we have a taxonomy of 7 or 8 key experiences, and then within those there are many expressions, many variations of those that we can map to that have really specific combinations. But in the end, it's pretty heuristic, meaning it's like there's a shorthand understanding of an all team meeting is pretty clear. People know what that means. So we don't have to go into a lot of detail to articulate what the business objectives are. But by kind of canonically saying what those objectives are and how we measure them and what the value, getting even into more detail, we're able to start building more of that value story over time. And when we get away from revenue, we're able to say, hey, look, the mix of what we're investing in here delivers these things. Those things have a certain impact. I'm not going to try to go into it because I don't remember it off the top of my head, but there's actually a lot of research around belonging that I'm sure maybe some of the future talks on that schedule we'll lean into. But belonging has value. Like it can be measured, and there's been some studies that show that creating a sense of belonging with employees can have this huge sort of productivity effect on an organization. But it's really hard to link that to a big strategic outcome if you're doing just very tactical work day to day, and this lets us build that story out. So this catalog becomes really central to all of our work because it gives us a single source of truth for what the business objectives are that we're trying to achieve with all of these experiences. And every time we add one, it goes back into this catalog and lets us consistently point back to that and say, this is our target. This is what we're trying to achieve. And it helps to sort of remove a lot of the ambiguity or the chaos that you can see across organizations like Google. Another thing it lets us do is start to scalably improve the ecosystem by having this framework that has ranging from very tactical to very strategic objectives and KPIs that are mapped. It lets us link those things, and now we can actually start to apply really systemic solutions. One thing that we can, so this is not an application of it, this is actually thinking about something that might be challenging to achieve very on a project to project basis or just purely tactical sort of approach. The new project is another part of the XI work. This is a really fantastic guide that I'd encourage you to go look at. So newproject.com, you can download this event professional guide to neuroinclusion. There was a lot of work here to work with the neurodivergent community to understand their needs within the event experience context. And this sets out a lot of those best practices and things that can be achieved. Now, you can just go apply this through pure process or, just operating procedure or sort of event to event design, all those things. So right away, this is very usable. But if we want to look at how we can improve things in a more systemic way and have a broader impact and sort of have a force multiplier effect here, then we're able to look at something like this, understand where we have perhaps technology or real estate or scenic design opportunities to improve neuro-inclusivity and factor those in and make those a part of that catalog, make those a part of the objectives that we try to achieve, which then become effectively a objective of record that we can map against. By doing that, we're highlighting this ability. We're able to sort of make it a much more measurable outcome that we can link to other pieces. And so it lets us start to look at things and apply them in a more systemic way. And it helps kind of keep this massive mess of cloud of all of these different programs and processes and teams kind of coming back consistently to this structured way of thinking about this thing. This is actually more of where we're starting to see where we can apply it within the system. So, and this is turning a corner a little bit into more of a design-oriented solution. So there are two pieces here to what I'm going to talk about. I'm not really going to go deep into Feltboard, but it's really the engine that powers Tabaret. So it's good. I have to point it out. Collectively, what we think of these as is sort of our experience platform. Now, this is just the start of it. There's a third program that we did park, and we haven't come back to yet. But ultimately, what we're trying to do is slowly build out more of a platform-like approach that lets us deliver experiences, whether that's events or activations, and this addresses both. So Feltboard is a kind of a specialized CMS. Tabaret is a responsive content template suite. So Tabaret is built on the idea of responsive web design that's sort of taken to the extreme within the built environment. Feltboard is something that we've been working on that we concepted, but then we've partnered with ThinkWell, who is now Tate, and they are building it and taking it to market. So it's actually going to be something that's available. It's not a Google product, it's a Tate product, but it's something that we've been a big part of helping try to imagine this new approach to CMSs. I think the kind of key highlights there is it really has the approach of thinking about holistic journeys, not just how do you manage a particular canvas. It's also built to be very enterprise secure and very, very highly scalable. So there are some interesting things. And then it supports this notion of Tabaret, which is, again, a responsive content library that's built on responsive web. And it kind of does the thing that responsive web needs that comes with the browser, which responsive web is dependent upon particular APIs in the browser that let you understand what kind of machine am I running on, how big is the screen, which direction does it turn, all those things, and that lets your application kind of scale to breakpoints. Tabaret does that. It expands the design system to the complete environment, multiple canvases and things like that, which I'm going to get to in a second. And Feltboard kind of provides that information and feeds it that data flow. Tabaret is right now just an internal product. I do hope we can externalize the design system in the future. It just hasn't been a top priority for us, but that's kind of always been the goal. And then we've been working on that with Downstream out of Portland. So I'm going to focus now kind of on Tabaret and just explain a bit more of that. So here are some of the key design principles here. We're kind of bridging a space between commodity digital signage and very bespoke digital activations. And right now, that's kind of directly where it's pointed, but it's certainly architected to expand well beyond that. It's pointed there because that's just been, frankly, our big scaling and volumetric challenge, right? We have a lot of canvases, we have a lot of event spaces, we have a lot of sort of intermediary interstitial spaces that we need to put content on. We need to do it very cost effectively, very efficiently, without a lot of intervention. At the same time, a lot of those spaces can be taken over for a particular event, and an agency might come in and deliver customized content. So this lets us bridge those two extremes. So it was really important for us to start from very, very fundamental design principles that don't take this into commodity digital signage, but do try to take, the kind of design approach that I think most of us are invested in and expand that and uplift that. So storytelling, inclusivity, and accessibility, as I said, that's the tie-in back to the new project and how we can start to look at things like, high contrast modes or different kinds of modes that might benefit different kinds of readers. There's a lot of opportunity there to customize to the user or to a group based on many different signals that we can include into the environment. So these are our core principles. And the idea here, and this is a pretty simple starting point. I don't think anything here is going to seem very groundbreaking, but I just wanted to talk about how we're linking all these things together. And a lot of times I feel like what we're doing is doing the work of the kind of 101, 201 level here, and then going and doing it here and doing it here, and then linking those. And suddenly it feels a lot more powerful. And well, it is a lot more powerful, but it's not quite as complex as you might think. So there's a layered approach here, very basic, two sort of layers. We have a background expression layer and a foreground information layer. And the reason this is this way is in at least one particular case where we kind of piloted this approach, but it wasn't quite this product. That background layer was very high performance graphic systems where the foreground layer was HTML. And that ability to combine those two things is really powerful. So if we go to really large video walls, very high pixel counts, we need high frame rates. We need more power than we might get out of a browser, even though the browsers these days are pretty powerful. And we're able to take this and with different compositing tools, put this together and make it work. So this has been an effective sort of abstraction for us to do this, where the background can be high performance, the foreground is still high performance, but it's HTML, and it lets us inherit all of those great aspects of responsive web design that come for free. We can build from. The next step here, and I think we have some downstream colleagues on who could probably explain this faster and better to me. And when I converted these slides, I see some of the lines moved around, but you'll get the idea. But there's two pieces to the way Feltboard kind of sets up an abstraction that then Tableau builds from, which is one, we have sort of a model of what the physical space is. So this is that physical space model. Like we have a space, we have canvases, and then we think about the journey, which could be different. It could be the same space, but a different journey. You could go in a reverse journey. Those canvases might then have different roles. And then we have the story construct, right? The narrative construct. So that those two things we maintain separately. So in this case, we have the journey template, which is basically, hey, this is the story I want to tell, the order I want to tell it in a sense. It's really a mapping of, this particular touch point or the particular role to a particular bit of information. And then how that impacts the information layer, and then how it might also impact the expression layer. So like it might speed up an animation, slow it down, change colors. All of those things are tweakable. So this is all built around the idea of generative content. So these things come together. We map that abstraction of the story onto those physical things. They have roles. Those are basically setting up breakpoints, right? So like going from a vertical canvas to a horizontal canvas would trigger a breakpoint in basic responsive web design. Same thing happens here, but by assigning roles to those canvases, we've given it one more layer that it can expand to. And of course, we can change those roles. And like canvas might be an entry mode. At one point, it might be a call to action. Another point, the roles. We have a starting point, but you could take this in any direction. And by the way, a lot of this stuff is built with the idea that we first start with sort of the scaffold and the superstructure for it, and then what goes inside of that. Certainly, we're going to normalize and make as standard as possible for our needs, but our needs might differ. So it doesn't mean that like it's designed in such a way that it's uniquely Google. It could be like what's in the middle could be replaced by a different sort of biased approach, like something that's more retail oriented or more museum oriented. This expands on that same idea. So here you can kind of see with this example how that starts to manifest. Now this is still very basic, right? But what this lets us do is go from having to create linear content, have it rendered out, and have it shipped over and loaded up to like go fill out a form in the CMS, apply this thing, and boom, the content does what it's supposed to do. And once we have that, we can continuously improve upon that. And that's really where the power is, because once we have this in place, and I would have pulled, I didn't have any photos from our most recent deployment, which is actually still underway, but we're deploying the production version of this into Singapore. I'm sorry, not Singapore, into a site in India right now. But unfortunately, it's still going, so I couldn't pull any photos there. But the idea here is like this becomes very, very buildable. We have beautiful backgrounds. We can endlessly commission more backgrounds, more expressions. We can endlessly add more front-end components that expand this. So a lot of this, we're inheriting things from like material design as a starting point, or other kind of design practices across the industry. So there's a lot of theft of idea and reapplying it into new ways here. So that is kind of my very fast run through. I wanted to leave plenty of time to have conversations. If you do have questions, you can reach out to me there, ryancehoward@google.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, all of those places. Like Josh, LinkedIn is probably the best place. I tend to avoid all the other social channels. So.
Right. Amazing. Thanks so much, Ryan. That was awesome. So if anybody has any questions, put it into the QA, or to actually just drop it in the chat. I will answer it from there. But I mean, this is a fascinating presentation, and I think it's so interesting too, because for a long time, in Blue Cadet's practice, we've spanned like web and experience design, and web, you see everything getting standardized. You saw like a lot of methodology coming around like UX and design systems and the adoption of things like material design. And then our practices and experience design was kind of still like the wild, wild west, or it was still like a folk art. And it seems really interesting what you guys are doing, which is like in some ways applying those kind of design principles that you'd find on a digital product and applying it to the physical environment. Is that the right way to understand it?
Yeah, I think a lot of this is, I mean, for me, I look where I can adapt an idea or concept from an adjacent space into a new space before inventing something new. Because 99.99% of the time, we don't really need to invent it. We can just adapt it. So I think there's a lot of that. The other thing is like recognizing this is not a race to commodity. It's not a race to the bottom. It's a way of trying to like create more well, first of all, expand the value, right? Like expand the overall impact of this investment and make sure it touches as much of the space as we can, people and business. But it also creates more room for investment in the bespoke is the idea, right? So like the more we don't repeat ourselves doing something that in the end you're like, okay, I've done this 5 times. Why are we doing it again? If we can kind of pseudo productize that or build it on a system and make that easier, then we can take that concept further the next time and we get more for our investment, whether it's money, resources, talent, those are all things that are in short demand. So a lot of it's really about not a race to the bottom, it's a race to expand the ceiling in many ways.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that you've actually seen that happen in the digital product side, honestly, where it's like because you have these structures and you have something that can be iterated and tested, that you end up with better products. It's not, I mean, there is a little bit of a sameness around some things, but then you get to focus on the things that make it like special and bespoke. Mandy Mandelstein had a question. Have you done any studies on saving on content production effort with a system like this? Have you ever done this?
Yeah, we have done some. We don't have an enormous amount of historic data, but we have done some projections. And I don't have the numbers, nor could I share the explicit numbers with
Yeah.
you at hand. But it's enough for us to continue to invest in this. And all of this is sort of with the idea of continuously moving towards a platform posture, whether that's a technology platform, a platform of platforms from a technology standpoint, or a business platform posture, which in the end really is all about creating network effect. And that's all dependent upon increased utilization, right? So one of the reasons we kind of focus on the area we're focused on, which is that kind of gap above digital signage, is because we can get the most network effect there. So the more places we have to apply it, the more we can do, and then the more that enables us to reach into the next more complex, more expensive, more complicated area. So it's it starts with showing that there's a savings and there's a savings trend, and then trying to continuously improve on that.
Right.
It's a long-term play.
Yeah. No, it makes total sense. Mark Brewster had a question. Actually, Mark, do you want to see if you can go? Can you see if you can ask it yourself? I'm gonna try that out. Can you go? Can you go audio on?
Maybe. Yeah. Not. Can you hear me?
Yes. Okay, this works.
Do you want to go on camera as well?
Sure. Go ahead.
Here I am.
Hello, Mark.
I love it, Ryan. Really insightful. Thank you for so generously sharing what Google are up to. As a framework for event design, I took loads of ideas from that. What I'm interested in is where it comes to impact driven event design, where you're looking to impact specific behaviors, attitudes, the sense of belonging. How do you at Google measure that?
The short answer is we haven't measured it very well to date. We've been exploring a lot of different angles, and we're slowly starting to measure things more effectively. I think what we can measure are a lot of the really technology-driven pieces. We can look at system performance. We can look at things, and there's a lot you can do. Like you can sort of figure out certain patterns in a system's behavior, like where a camera points or how a space is utilized, like what it translates to and to how it's being used. And you can make suppositions, I guess. But to directly measure it is hard. We have been exploring things, especially through the XI work, about measuring belonging. I know there's a lot of different frameworks, like different return on whatever frameworks, so return on experience, return on emotion, all those things. Some of those things we've applied. We actually did use the return on emotion framework for XI days. That's one thing we've tried. We haven't applied it at scale, and we're experimenting with some sentiment analysis tools now to see if we can use those to also give us signals. I think in the end, like one of the reasons for the ExPo framework, which is really a way of organizing the data and pulling out insights versus trying to like come up with the magic measurement, is because it seems obvious to us the more we go. Like there's no magic index, right? It'd be great to get to one index, but we haven't been able to. So we've been trying to find a way where we can use any of them or all of them, depending on what our needs are, and then understand what the underlying signals are that can sort of be translated into any of those particular insights. But yeah, we haven't been able to really at scale do that. I think that's a challenge for everyone. For us, a lot of it has to do with just the fact, like what I said, like we're building spaces that are then operated for years and years and years by particular teams, and then they're facilitated sort of by additional event service teams. And so we can't move super fast because we don't have like one space we can just continuously update. We have dozens and dozens. So there's a scale challenge there for us to apply really particular, very tactical measurement methods that, and then anything that's really manual is obviously also hard for us to sort of do at scale. We can try it on one thing, but it doesn't necessarily tell us what's happening across, 10,000 events a year kind of
Right.
space.
Actually,
What we have.
So can I go with a follow-up question?
Sure. I actually, Tim Larson from Downstream also raised his hand. I didn't know if you wanted to jump in on an answer there as well. Tim, did you want to chime in on that?
Well, I just had another question, just in terms of the typically the senior executives that are analyzing the ROI part of this that you discussed at the beginning are really looking at two things. They're looking at both the capital costs and the operational costs, and I think a lot of what the program we put together and that you've discussed here is around that operational piece. And so I was curious on the capital side, have you done any analysis on the stratification of those experiences? Something like what is the cost and impact in terms of the capital layer of that? Obviously, the operational piece is designed to maximize that investment, but I'm curious if there's sort of any ideas around like a gold, silver, bronze approach to the cost for capital.
We definitely have been doing that. It's a combination of analysis and strategy development, I think. And so you don't really get to a number yielded by analysis that then just magically becomes your strategy. We have actually avoided the whole gold, silver, platinum thing because it implies kind of like something is worse than something else. So we talk about different classes and different sort of business problem. We talk about different business problem classes from a strategy standpoint. The analytics side is trying to like look at the signals, cluster those, understand how those then can be translated back to that other sort of to the business problem classification model. In the end, it's not like a linear tiering. It's actually like a really complex mix of business needs that like mix in different ways. So it's kind of like a marketing mix problem in a sense, right? Like you have a different marketing mix for different kinds of products, different kinds of audiences. It's the same thing. It might be about collaboration. It might be about presentation. It might be about brand. All of those things come into different sort of different parts of that mix of what the core objectives are and what the core needs are. The framework is equally about CapEx and OpEx. The CapEx and OpEx problem actually is more of like it's more of a not political, like it's more of a planning challenge, right? It's more of like how do you shape your investment? It becomes an investment strategy challenge. The money is the money in the end. And we do have to understand like when do we invest more in the ecosystem itself versus how we utilize the ecosystem? So two different sort of dimensions there, right? What do we build? What services do we put in place? All of that can be capital, it can be OpEx maintained over many years. It's a long-term commitment versus do we spend more money on a per event basis? So we do less with that sort of long-term investment. And balancing those two things is a calculus problem that we're constantly kind of trying to understand and get better at. And then the business itself changes, right? The business environment changes, and you go from one company to another company, there might be a different preference for CapEx versus OpEx. There's also like continuously changing business environments that mean like the value of presentation versus collaboration might change, or brand, team building. Like if you're in a growth mode, then culture building is really, really critical. If you're in more of a maintenance mode, or you're not in such a growth mode, then it's a different sort of thing that you're trying to do. You're not necessarily trying to constantly, bring new people into the culture and acculturate them. You're trying to do something else. And so like all those things, I think, shift depending on the business. So the CapEx versus OpEx thing, yes, you're right. At the very top level, those are important. But then how we get the strategy by which we meet those executive CFO level expectations can be very complex in terms of how we think about that from 1 year to the next, or sometimes even within a year.
That's really interesting. I want to actually put my own question in here for a minute, sort of jump the line, but I'm curious. Do you think that this framework or this way of thinking is applicable to other sort of like larger organizations, like larger museums, like themed entertainment, hospitality? How portable is this framework?
I mean, I think the basic framework, what I showed today, is super portable. And like I said, the exact objectives and KPIs you're trying to track within that framework can vary a lot. But I think what we suspect is that the higher up you go, the more alike they are from organization to organization. And then from the very bottom, they're also probably pretty close, because it's like still you're getting into technology and service SLOs and things like that are very tactical kinds of signals. The middle is probably where you see the most variation from business to business or org to org, in terms of like the heuristic layer for us, where that's really about, hey, is this a town hall? Is this a 3-day planning workshop? That's quite different than the heuristic layer that might be at a museum, where it might be about an artist talk or an exhibit or something like that. And the idea of that one, that's why that layer is really important, is because it's the easiest entry point for most people. But then the next layer up is where most of those people's leadership, are asking questions, and then layer down is where the people who are executing need to know the details. So I think that makes it very transportable. And ultimately, I kind of feel like at the top, we keep looking around, the industry, like not just the industry, just look around the business world, and we have looked at this and pulled in different references from like Harvard Business Review and other things like that. If we could find evidence of, hey, here's a top line business strategy, or objective, these are the kinds of KPIs that start to indicate that, and then can we kind of create a sort of dependency chain that we can reverse engineer that and say, okay, this investment actually is important because it enables this big strategic, high value outcome. Because again, when you're not close to revenue, it's hard to draw that correlation back to the value. Like it's not just a simple math equation of money in, money out.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I think we have time for one quick question. Gideon, did you want to ask your question?
Sure. Ryan, great presentation. Great to see the progress you've made on kind of forging this middle ground between just commoditized digital work and full on bespoke experience designs. And I know that's been an objective of yours. I'm just curious, what kind of challenges have you been seeing in putting together the physical kit of parts that goes with this platform approach? And are you beginning to think about industrial design approaches to getting some custom things that create that ease of creating that middle ground experience from the physical side?
Yeah, and I mean, we have actually explored certain things. Like we explored a smart guest badge, and we took it all the way to prototype. Actually, we took it all the way, basically just short of production, which had a strong industrial design aspect. It also expanded a lot of that Tabaret responsive design system to be more interactive with the entire environment, which I didn't really get into. So we have definitely done that. The challenge is basically like you have to have sufficient business demand to make those investments. Um, that's the biggest one, honestly. Like you need to have enough of a market effectively to make the investment to see it. And so that's part of that changing business environment challenge. Um, so that doesn't mean like there aren't pathways towards it, and we're constantly looking at that. It's the approach we take, right? It's like, do you do this in this very slow sort of like, you know, it's a slow growth kind of approach and strategy where you're constantly trying to find like really strategic outcomes, maximizing every strategic outcome from every tactical opportunity? Or are you able to make a like really concerted, focused investment and rapidly cover a lot of ground? And that's attention, and I think it depends not just on the org, but at the time. You know, what kind of time and space is the org in terms of its business model and its business objectives.
All right, that's
Great, thank you.
I have so many follow-up questions, but I think we're at time. Ryan, thank you so much. This was really, really awesome, super inspiring, super interesting. I would say if anybody has any follow-up questions, just email me at josh@futurespace.com, and I'll try to funnel those over to Ryan and hopefully not be too abusive with his time. But again, thank you so much for joining me. This was really fantastic. For everybody else, I hope you guys can join me. Y'all can join me on a future Spaces a webinar or in-person event. And I hope everyone has a wonderful weekend. We'll talk on the other side.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Ryan. All right, see you guys. See you, everyone. Bye.